The Supreme Court of the United States is established under Article 3 of the Constitution in Section 1. It is the only court that the framers specifically mentioned. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So they leave it in the power of Congress to make other courts. But we have to have this Supreme Court, according to the Constitution. The judges both of the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior, and shall, at stated times, receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. So we can't hold a pay cut over somebody's head who might be serving on the Supreme Court as a justice. And here's more. Section 2, the constitutional authority. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority, to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and citizens of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming land under grants of different states, and between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign state citizens or subjects. So this is where the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction, what you see on this slide. Original jurisdiction means don't stop at an inferior court, you're going right to the Supreme Court. Appellate jurisdiction, on the other hand, you work your way up from the trial courts to the appellate courts to the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court wants to hear you, that's a whole other question, because they get to pick their cases, because there are so many of them. So in all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, and those in which a state, meaning like Ohio or Illinois, shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. Cut. That's it. In all the other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, meaning you work your way up from trial to appellate to Supreme, if the Supreme Court again even wants to hear your case, both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall make. So again, ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, and those in which a state shall be a party, again meaning Indiana or Florida, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. That's it. Very, very limited by the framers into what the Supreme Court is allowed to hear as a court of first instance. In all the other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, meaning you work your way up. And if the Supreme Court wants to hear it, they'll hear it after you get through the appellate stage. I think that might be on the test, since I just spent about a minute on it. Could be. That'd be a safe bet. The trial of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury, and such trial shall be held in the state where the said crime shall have been committed. But when not committed within any state, the trial shall be at such place or places as the Congress may by law have directed. So you're entitled to have a trial by a jury of your peers on or around the place where the crime you are accused of was committed. But if you say commit a crime at sea in international waters, or even off the waters of the United States someplace, well, your trial, like it says, the trial shall be at such place or places as the Congress may by law have directed. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort, Again, a very narrow definition of what treason is. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act, or on confession in open court. That's it. You have 2 people who say they saw you do the thing, or you suddenly, and I imagine if you commit treason, you don't have much of a conscience, you suddenly grow a conscience, start crying, and confess to whatever you did in court. That's it. The Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood. Now that's an important concept that comes to us from our English forebears and from where they got it, if they inherited it from someplace or someone, I'm really not qualified to say. Corruption of blood. So if I was to rob a convenience store, let's say we live in a really tyrannical society, and I'm sentenced to life in prison, and I have to give up my house and everything in it, and the state seizes my bank accounts. Now, because of corruption of blood, my wife is guilty by association by her marriage to me. My daughter's guilty because I'm her father. And my daughter and my wife will have to, or would have to, live with the stain of what I had done forever after. And probably my daughter's children, if she has them, and maybe their children, Grandpa Jonathan robbed this convenience store. Oh, aren't we ashamed? Aren't we a bad family? I don't know why it worked that way once upon a time, but it did. But we changed that. No attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. So my crime dies with me. Doesn't live to haunt my descendants. So we'll look at Douglas Chandler, who was a traitor. He was in the Navy during the First World War. He was a stockbroker in the 1920s. Like so many people during that time, lost everything in the crash of 29. So he turned to journalism, thought he'd do well there. He took a job at the Baltimore News-American and was thought to be charming but arrogant by his colleagues. He grew really pessimistic about the state of the nation and began to blame his failure at not being as successful or as rich or whatever as he thought he should have been on the Jews. So in 31, he gets on a ship with his wife and 2 daughters. They go to France, and he discovers a deep and abiding passion for 2 things, photography and Nazism. He bought a camera. He became a freelancer for National Geographic. He eventually works for them as a freelancer. He visits Germany for the first time. He's introduced to the Nazi press department's attaché and general counsel in Munich. So he's looking for work, and the associate editor of National Geographic, a magazine which is still in existence today, proposes to Chandler that he writes an article about Berlin, and he wants Berlin in this article to be written about in a kindly nature and apolitical. And you can kind of see here, Changing Berlin with 30 illustrations by Douglas Chandler. There it is. So Chandler agreed. He produces a 9,000-word essay titled Berlin, City of Rivers and Trees, which gets changed to what you see there. And the magazine pays him $500, which does not sound like a whole lot of money to us right now, but back in the day, wow, that was quite a bit. And I just did the calculation. 1937, $500 would be $11,138.72. And the rate of inflation from 1937 to now is a whopping 2,127.7%. So, isn't that great about the state of our monetary system? He meets in 37 Ulrich von Berlau, and he's in charge, Berlau, of recruiting Americans and Brits for Joseph Goebbels' propaganda ministry. Goebbels was a prominent Nazi in the Third Reich. Chandler had other assignments as a freelancer and returned to Germany in 1938 and says, I find a thrilling and admirable new social order in the process of beginning here. In 39, a friend of Chandler's magazine editor visits the Chandlers and writes to National Geographic that the disturbing thing to me was that Mr. Chandler was more pro-Nazi and anti-Jewish than any man I met anywhere on our trip. So they send a staff member to corroborate that allegation, and the staff member confirmed the allegation as being entirely truthful. So in response, National Geographic absolutely does the right thing, and the editor orders correspondence with Chandler stopped. He cancels an upcoming assignment that he had given Chandler to Albania and reported Chandler to the U.S. government. And in 1940, the U.S. Consul in Italy orders every American back to the United States. And in response, Chandler gets a visa and goes to Germany with his family, I guess as one does. Once in Germany and settled, he offered his services to Joseph Goebbels' propaganda recruiter for free, and he gets his own radio show piped into the United States via shortwave radio, and his name is Paul Revere, his code name. The name he goes by, like, this is DJ Paul Revere. His specific material for the broadcast came from daily meetings that was led by Goebbels, so he didn't have editorial freedom. And 1 month into the program, he reveals his identity. He, again, remember his colleagues from an earlier job found him charming but arrogant, so he causes trouble for the bosses in Germany. Says he doesn't like the show's music, he doesn't like the other announcers he worked with, and he didn't like being told what to say. And his bosses, in response, suspended him and threatened him with a lawsuit. So what to do there? He got back into radio after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and says, yes, by all means let Pearl Harbor be avenged, but not upon the Japanese, upon the real authors of this war, the Jews. So in 1942, the United States government begins prosecuting traitors. Chandler was indicted as a traitor, and he blamed that indictment, again, on the Jews. And his broadcasts, however, in response, became increasingly mild post-indictment. He might have seen the writing on the wall at that point. He was apprehended after victory in Europe. His case goes to trial in 1947, and it's estimated that about 150,000 to 300,000 Americans had heard Chandler's radio program. His lawyers, because there's no real way to defend this, offers a defense of insanity, but it didn't hold up against the witness testimony that our government brought. 16 of the 20 witnesses had worked directly with Chandler and could testify to the fact that he was not insane. He was found guilty of treason and sentenced to life in prison and a $10,000 fine. He served 15 years of that sentence until the U.S. Attorney General announced that Chandler would be released into the care of one of his daughters. He was a 73-year-old man at that point. Turns out an Episcopal minister appealed directly to President Kennedy about Chandler's case and got the sentence commuted so he didn't have to pay the fine. And after he was free and clear of prison, Chandler went right back to Germany. Some years later, he sends a letter to National Geographic asking for reimbursement for expenses that he had accrued on an assignment that was canceled due to World War II, and that was the last anybody had heard of him in any official capacity. And that ends the story of Douglas Chandler. We'll pick right back up with John Jay in part 2.